I don't know. I looked exhausted, puffy, super
Puffy.
puffy, like super puffy. Apparently, you can get arthritis postpartum.
Hello, everyone. You're listening to Baby Steps, sponsored by Oxford and Soho Baby, a podcast dedicated to exploring the personal and emotional journeys of parenting. I'm your host, Medea. Today I have Chantal, content creator and mother of one. Chantal, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, thank you for joining.
Of course.
We're going to start by going back to when you were pregnant.
Oh God. Actually, to be honest with you, I had a really great pregnancy.
Okay, that's good to hear. I get some mixed messages on that. So,
Yeah.
what were some of the most memorable moments during your pregnancy, good or bad?
Oh man, I think probably the most memorable moment is when you find out what sex it is. At
Okay.
least for me, it was. I was hoping obviously for a certain sex, and I completely thought that it was the opposite the day that we left the hospital. For some reason, I thought that my doctor had said he like twice, and
Oh, but he
I almost
didn't?
lost it. Well, I live in Mexico City, right? So the way he had talked about it sounded more in like a masculine tone than it did feminine.
Oh, okay.
So when we left the hospital, I kind of looked at my husband and I was like, "Do you, I feel like it's a boy. Like I feel like he said it was a boy." And he was like, "Me too." And it was that exact day in the afternoon that we were going to find out what it was. So we both left thinking it was a boy. And that evening we did the reveal and she was a girl. This is so
And that's what you wanted.
I did. I wanted a girl. So I think we were even more shocked because for some reason we both assumed that it was going to be a boy. So it was fun to do a reveal and see, I mean, at the end. But you know what's funny is that I've met so many people through my pregnancy journey that have said that they had a reveal. And until the day of the birth, like five people told me this, until the day of the birth, it was the exact opposite sex. And the entire pregnancy, they thought that it was the other. Like this has
Why is
happened.
that? Are there like hints, like the way that the belly is shaped
No,
or
like the hospital told them that it was going to be a certain sex and it ended up being the exact opposite.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how it happens, but I guess it happens often. And the surprise is when you give birth.
Some people just wait until they give birth to find
That's
out.
crazy to me. I don't really love surprises in general. Plus, I
Me
feel like
either.
birth is something obviously, and this is something that you learn when you have a child that you can't plan anything. Like everything is literally out of your hands.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but knowing the sex, I feel like gives you a little bit of certainty of something.
Yeah, a little sense of control. You can plan the nursery, get the
A
clothes.
little bit, yeah. So I can
Yeah.
only imagine having that little sense of control and then having it ripped out of your hands like 2 minutes later.
Yeah. Um, did you receive any advice from friends, family, healthcare providers that stuck with you through your journey?
Yeah, I think a lot of mostly preparing for birth, I think the majority, and breastfeeding, obviously, which is super challenging, at least in my opinion. I think those were the most focused areas. The rest of it is just kind of a very personal experience. So I don't think people I mean, they give you advice about how to be a mom, I guess, but it's not really helpful. I think like
Oh, okay.
every mom experience is so different and every kid is so different that
Mhm.
I don't think my experience personally wouldn't necessarily be helpful to explain in detail to another mom because she could have a completely different experience with her child. So I would definitely think the most information that was given to me is for birth and breastfeeding, without a doubt.
Birth and breastfeeding. Did you
Yeah.
have a birthing plan?
I wanted to have a natural birth. That was something that was basically my plan.
Hmm.
And like I said, literally nothing is in your hands, right? So halfway through my pregnancy, I found out that my baby had the umbilical cord wrapped around her neck 3 times. They thought originally it was twice, but it was three. Apparently, this happens quite often. So it's not like that alarming. But
Okay.
obviously, to a first-time mom, it was sort of alarming because once your doctors are like, no, it's fine, this happens often, she could untangle herself. We just have to like kind of monitor it during your appointments.
Hmm.
And she ended up wiggling herself out of one. So she only had two by the time we were ready to give birth. but it's something they have to monitor because they can obviously cause damage during, I mean, not damage, but it could be very dangerous for the baby during birth.
Yeah.
So that was something that I was like mostly worried about during my plan to have a natural birth.
Yeah.
Because as soon as it becomes where her heart rate goes up or something isn't right, it automatically goes to C-section. And I, for some reason, was terrified about having a C-section. I don't know. There's such a variety of having a natural birth is better, or just in general, your mindset about having a natural birth. And I know so many people that just like, no, I'm good. Like, I'd rather schedule it and
Yeah.
be out and, have whatever. I was terrified about having a C-section. It sounds so painful and
Hmm.
major surgery. I don't know, it just wasn't for me. And so honestly, I asked my doctor, like, please do everything you can within the limits of her health to let me have a natural birth. Like that was my plan, basically. Like I think it's funny, like people create these huge elaborate plans. Not like you get to the hospital and shit fucking hits the fan. Like you don't know what's gonna happen. Your body is just kind of going with the flow and your baby is trying to get out. And I don't know, it's funny to plan for something that you really have zero control over.
Yeah. How many hours were you giving birth for?
So I started having contractions at midnight and I sat in bed and measured them for like an hour. And they were pretty like solid. They were like a minute long for 5 minutes, like every 5 minutes. So like I was Googling in bed, like, what do you do? Like, when do you should you go to the hospital? And it was basically like when it's a minute for every 5 minutes, you should go to the hospital. And so I'm like sitting there like, fuck, like it's gonna be 3 o'clock in the morning. Like, what do I do? Should I
Hmm.
wait? Like, so I got in the shower and I was seeing if like it would help me like relieve. No, like I was literally going into labor, right? But like you don't know, I don't know, you don't know these things when you're like a first time mom, I guess.
Yeah, and you're overwhelmed.
I don't know. I don't know. Plus it's 3 in the morning and like I'm very like I'm not gonna call my doctor at 3 in the morning. I don't know. So I like texted a girlfriend of mine who just had a baby a month before me because I knew she would be awake breastfeeding. And I was like, hey, like I'm having contractions. And she literally texted me, was like, stop texting me, call your doctor. And I'm like, really? She's like, yes, like you're an
Yes.
idiot. Call your doctor. So I call him. I'm like, hi, sorry, it's me. Like I've been having contractions. He's like, for how long? I'm like, an hour for blah, blah, blah. He's like, hang up the phone and go to the hospital. I'm like, oh my God, this is for real. Like this is happening right now.
Hmm.
So I get to the hospital at like 3:30 in the morning and they admit me and I was already dilated to 5 by the time I got there. And they gave me my epidural and I slept for like another, I guess until like 10 o'clock in the morning. So like I was dilating while I was asleep, basically, which is awesome.
Yeah, that's
So
so
like
nice.
around 10 a.m., they came in and they were like checking me. They're like, all right, you're dilated to 10. Like, let's start pushing. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, people don't tell you these things. Like, I feel like the majority of people don't explain to me how it works. Like, you're not in like an operating room or anything. You're in like your room that you checked into and you're pushing on like a bed. I'm like, here? He's like, yeah, here. Like, what are you talking about? I'm like, what is going on? I always feel like in the movies, like they like roll you into somewhere else. I don't know.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, no. So like I'm
Oh.
just like in the bed that I'm in. And my daughter was coming in not like straight, like a little bit to the side. So every time I would push, she would come back out or come back in. Um, so we were there for like an hour pushing and it wasn't working. So then they rolled me out and rolled me into an ER just in case like the stress of me pushing and her trying to come out got to be too much for her heart rate.
Mhm.
Then we would immediately be going to a C-section. So they had like the bed right next to me while I'm like in the OR. And eventually my doctor basically just got on top of me and like within like the last push, she was like, this is it. Like you have literally two more chances. The first one didn't work. And then he was like, all right, like move the doctor to like where he was because he was frontal and was like, all right, like give me your biggest push. She's like, go and like pushed her out legitimately. And
Wait,
he
so he was on top of
was
you
on top of me, yeah, and like pushed her throughout like my abdomen.
and it
Insane.
worked?
Yeah, came out. It was insane. He
Whoa.
was like, honestly, doctors or pediatricians don't love when I do that. And obviously, like your pediatrician is there in the room. And he was fine with it because she just needed like a little bit of movement. And so it worked, thank God. But it's something that they do. I mean, I don't know. I've never like asked people about their birthing stories, really, to be honest. But apparently it's something that they do and they don't love when they do it, but it worked and she came out perfect. And she was honestly like, that pediatrician was like, I don't give 10 out of 10s, but if I could, your daughter is a 10 out of 10 health list. And I was like,
That's amazing.
solid. So yeah, it wasn't like I would say a long time because I feel like I was only really pushing for about an hour and a half. But like thinking from 3 in the morning till like noon, I mean,
That's pretty good. Some people are in labor for 8 hours straight, like
yeah, I mean,
pushing.
I don't know how they do it.
I,
It's exhausting. The next morning, I feel like I was hit by a truck and I was so like how do you even say like like not bloated but like from like pushing and like retaining water and everything. I was just like I don't know. I looked exhausted, puffy, super
puffy.
puffy, like super puffy. Everything in my body hurt. Like every muscle in my body hurt from pushing out this child. Like I can only imagine being there for 8 hours pushing, like how you feel the next day.
Yeah, so what did the next day look like?
Oh my God, I feel like everything after that was like a blur. The next day, well, I gave birth in Mexico, so I don't
Oh.
know if that's very different from giving birth in the US. But the next day was pretty much me recuperating, and
Hmm.
they bring in your baby, um, like to eat with you, obviously, because if you're breastfeeding, and then they take her back and they like take care of her for a little bit. And it's both mostly just like you in and out, like sleeping and like recuperating from like everything really.
Hmm.
Lots of bleeding, lots of changing diapers. Um,
Hmm.
what else? I mean, it's just really kind of getting yourself back to being able to take care of a child. I think like the next day is like the day that you check out. I had a lactation consultant come that day to help me with my breastfeeding to the hospital, which was helpful, but I don't think anybody can mentally prepare you for that experience. Breastfeeding was super challenging for me, honestly. It wasn't, it was probably my least part about pregnancy and giving birth, my least
Hmm.
favorite part. Um, so I don't know. I always wish that like I would be a person that would just like flow
Yeah.
and that's like a great breastfeeding experience. But unfortunately that wasn't my case. So I really had to like learn to embrace the fact that my body just wasn't that type of body. And
Hmm.
it was really hard for me to accept that in the beginning, but it's like so difficult. It was so difficult for me personally. And I would like sit there like crying. Like my husband would look at me and like, why are you putting yourself through this? Like, why are you doing this? And in
Hmm.
your mind, it's like a conflict of interest between being mentally stable and breastfeeding your child, because that's like what nature wants you to do.
Hmm.
So that was really interesting. But yeah, the next couple of days are just kind of like a blur of getting yourself back together. Also, what's
Yeah.
funny is I don't think anybody tells you that you look pregnant for like at least a month after you give birth still, which is shocking.
But the baby's not there, so why?
No, but everything else is like
Oh.
everything else is still there. Like your liquids are still there, the blood's still there. Like that, it's interesting to me because nobody really talks about that, but it's a weird month after your baby is born where you're just like, when is this going away? Like,
Yeah.
I don't
So
know how
when
old
did it
in
when
my
did it
20s, I was like, it probably just leaves, right? Like, I don't know.
yeah.
Went probably like a month, honestly.
What, so naturally it just started going away, or were you doing
Yeah.
workouts?
No, honestly, I did this thing. I don't know again if that like exists in the US, but like here in Mexico, it's called cuarentena. It's like 40 days. So you're not
Mhm.
supposed to like leave your house for 40 days after your child is born. And
Oh,
I
okay.
totally followed that rule. Like I literally didn't leave my house for 40 days. And it was great. It's like great bonding for honestly, you don't want to go anywhere after you just gave birth anyways.
Yeah.
But it's really great bonding and just spending time at home. And I could care less what I look like. The last important thing on my mind, honestly, was my body. Because, like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I just feel like it's so unimportant at that time. Like, you're so worried about like them eating every 3 hours and sleeping and not sleeping. and you guys connecting and you're breastfeeding and you getting sleep and like I don't know, there's just so much going on that the last thing I was worrying about was my body. And that's probably like been the easiest part about it. I feel like naturally your body just understands that like you were pregnant, you gave birth, and you no longer are.
Mm-hmm. It just
Uh,
goes back to normal.
yeah, I would say. I know a couple of people who have had like symptoms arise from pregnancy, which I feel awful. Like a girlfriend of mine had a child a month after I did, and it caused her to get I don't know what it would be, the exact translation, but basically postpartum arthritis. There's
Whoa.
like, yeah, apparently you can get arthritis postpartum, and she has it, and she's miserable. Like all of her, everything hurts. Like she was telling me the other day about just holding her daughter, like hurts her wrist so bad. So there's like so many things that can come of being pregnant that I'm very happy that I did not get. But I mean, you never know. Pregnancy is like
A mystery.
roulette.
Yeah.
It's a mystery.
What was the most surprising thing about your birthing journey?
The most surprising thing about birthing? I don't know. I don't think anything was surprising because everything is kind of surprising. You don't actually know what's coming.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know. That's an interesting question. I just feel like as it's your first time, so you really don't know what to expect. Or at least I tried not to put any expectations on the situation because I just didn't want to like compare myself to anybody or compare myself to any idea or concept. I just kind of let it flow, especially because you're just more worried about like the health of your child. Like you're not really worried about anything else in that moment except for the process and making sure that your baby is healthy. So I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that anything would be surprising in general, just the fact that the human body is
Capable of so
capable
much.
of, yeah, it's wow. Like I have so much respect for my body now after that experience that you don't really think about things like I don't know. I never really gave a thought that I don't know. I never really thought that much about like nipples, for example. Like sure, like they exist and they're there. But like it was never like a huge thought process to me. And
Mhm.
now it's like, wow, like I love them. Like they're amazing. They've done some amazing things and they have seen real struggle. So
Mhm.
like it makes you really appreciate the small things.
Wow. I like that.
Appreciate
But
your nipples. I swear to God.
appreciate your nipples, everyone.
Seriously, you have no idea what they go through. I met a girlfriend of mine before I was giving birth and she wanted to like tell me like things about to prepare myself. And when we were talking about breastfeeding, she literally told me to grab one of those like metalish mesh things to use to clean your pants. You know what I'm talking about?
I think so.
And to rub them on my nipples to prepare myself for breastfeeding.
Because that's how much it hurts.
Yes. And
Oh
I'm
my
there having coffee
gosh.
with her. And I'm like, you're joking, right? She's like, no, I swear to God, like it really helps. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. Like it's not gonna happen. Now I get it.
Yeah, now you understand.
I get it. I mean, I would never do that to myself. That sounds like torture. But I mean, it's pretty much it's a similar sensation.
Wow, I didn't know that it hurt.
I mean, that's the thing. Like lactation consultants are always saying like it shouldn't hurt. Well, obviously it like you have, I mean, I'm guessing the majority of women have very sensitive nipples, right? It's like something that we talk about. It's something that exists, like the sensitivity of them.
Hmm.
And you're having a newborn who's learning how to suction, basically suck milk out of them. Like you, obviously they're going to be, it's a lot.
It's
They're
a lot,
tender.
yeah.
There's a lot of moisture going on. It gets raw. And then like the pump also, like I was using the wrong size of breast pump. So like it was basically like rubbing on my skin and I was like peeling basically. Like there's so many things that can go wrong in this world of nipples that you don't think about until you're living it. And it's funny because really everyone's always like, no, it shouldn't hurt. No, it's very painful. Like I would sit there and like cry and watch my child like eat and be so happy that she's eating, but at the same time be like, this is the most painful thing I've ever done in my entire life.
Wow.
And I just gave birth. Like,
Yeah, just did something very
this was
painful.
like, whatever. I was expecting it to be way worse, to be honest with you. Breastfeeding, on the other hand, was insane.
Wow. That's good to know. I wonder if other women listening had an experience like that.
I would think so. It would be insane to me to think that that wasn't what other people experienced. But again, I mean, I don't know. I'm sure that there are women that honestly have had a great breastfeeding experience, and I truly envy them.
hmm Final question. What advice would you give other mothers listening?
Oh my God. So for me personally, I was really worried about postpartum depression.
hmm
Previously, I have had therapy for depression, so I know what that feels like. And I know like the feeling. I was in my 20s and I feel like I was just like hormonally imbalanced. And that's literally what happens during pregnancy. So I was really worried about it, to be honest with you. And I know for a fact that I had postpartum depression, like 1,000%. And by
hmm
the time I had reached called my psychologist, it was like 3 months postpartum because I don't have time. Like, you literally don't have time to call somebody and be like, hey, I don't feel all right. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
like, I was sitting there for 3 months being like, I know I'm depressed. I know, like, I'm not okay, but there's nothing you can do about it. So, like, my advice to people are if you are having that feeling, try to find 5 minutes. Like, I know how exhausted you are. Trust me. You have time to pee, you have 5 minutes to call somebody and talk to them about how you're feeling because I've been there and it's rough. So, like, postpartum depression is real and your mental health is so important to you and your baby that it should definitely be priority.
Yeah, that's number one priority is mental health. Because how are you going
Totally.
to take care of your baby if you're not feeling okay?
1,000%. And like, you really don't get that when you're living in the moment because you're so worried about the child physically,
hmm
like actually making like allowing it to sleep and eat and repeat every 3 hours, that you're not worried about that as much. Like, again, like, I feel like you just are on the back burner. Like, the mom is just there to make sure that the child is surviving and you're in survival mode. And so you and your mental health are kind of just like like thrown to the back, but it's so true. Like, if you're not okay, your experience as a mother will not be okay, and your child also will not be okay. So, like, definitely make it a priority to sit down and, I don't know, find a way to like clear your mind, meditate, call someone, and stay, read a book. But and I get how hard it is. Honestly, like, I repeat this. I understand how hard it is to find the time, but try to because it'll make you feel so much better.
All right. I hope that resonated with some listeners out there.
Yeah, me too. I get it. I've
Um,
been
yeah, that's all we have for today.
there.
Chantal,
Amazing.
thank you for coming on.
Thank you. It was so nice to meet you.
So nice to meet you too. Listeners, thank you for tuning in. You've been listening to Baby Steps, sponsored by Oxford and Soho Baby. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Bye.
You've been listening to Baby Steps, sponsored by Oxford and Soho Baby. If you're in the market for a new crib, glider, dresser, or more, we'd love for you to check out our line of furniture. Head over to oxfordbabyandkids.com or sohobaby.com. All links are within the show notes. For more information as a listener, enter the code podcast10 for 10% off your total purchase, plus free shipping on all orders over $799. Thanks for listening and tune into our next episode. Bye for now, and remember, every step is a step towards progress. We hope today's story gives you the confidence and the assurance that every journey is different, but we do it together.